How's it going, comic book junkies? Welcome to Cafeteria Drops Minute-ish Reviews. Today we're diving into Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 1. And let me tell you, it's wild, but ultimately a disappointing ride. Alright, let's talk story. Dennis Camp takes us on another twisted journey through the mind of Bloodshot, who's been shot in the head too many times apparently, and is on a mission for vengeance against the spent shells. This one is a killer robot apparently. But here's where things get interesting. Bloodshot's got this sidekick, Bloodsquirt, who's a voice in his head, urging him to keep the killing spree going. Talk about a moral compass gone haywire. And then there's the narrative focus on the innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. We're talking about folks with real struggles. An alcoholic doctor, a widow with a peacemaker, and an out-of-work father turned homeless. It's a gut-wrenching reminder of the collateral damage in the superhero world, and it's also where the story shines brightest. And now, this is where things get a bit dicey. The attempts at humor from Bloodsquirt fall flat, and the villain, he's completely forgettable. Not exactly captivating like villains from the previous Bloodshot runs. And Valiant, why do you do this? Don't even get me started on that confusing ending. I mean, how does a lever-action shotgun suddenly become the hero's saving grace against an indestructible killer android when that hasn't worked previously in the comic? Talk about a head-scratcher. Overall, while the focus on the villains adds depth to the story, the rest of it falls short. It's like trying to reboot a classic recipe but missing a few key ingredients. Props to Dennis Camp for the effort, but it's just not hitting the mark like the other series runs featuring Bloodshot. Now let's discuss the visuals. Alright comic fans, let's buckle up because we're diving into the visuals of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 1. Let's start with the trade dress. Valiant and Alien Books nailed it again with that premium feel. I'm talking cardstock cover and thick, glossy pages that scream quality. Kudos for that. But here's where things take a bit of a dip. The visuals inside the comic. Now, don't get me wrong, Al Barrenuevo's pencils are decent, but they lack the wow factor that we got from John Davis Hunt in the previous run. And let's talk about colors by Ezequiel Fernandez-Roel. They're just decent. They're a bit washed out, and they don't really do justice to the gritty world of Bloodshot. Plus, the over-reliance on those custom blood splatter brushes in Photoshop is a bit amateurish. Overall, the visuals just feel okay, alright. They're not bad per se, but they definitely don't live up to the bar set in previous Bloodshot series. It's like going from a gourmet meal to a microwave dinner. It gets the job done, but it's nothing to write home about. So while the trade dress may draw you in, the visuals inside might leave you wanting for more. Here's hoping for a return to form in future issues of Bloodshot. So if you're a Bloodshot fan looking for a nostalgic kick, give it a shot. Otherwise, you might want to look elsewhere for your action fix. Until next time, comic book buffs, keep your eyes peeled for those hidden gems. See you next time on Minute-ish Reviews on Cafeteria Drops. How's it going, comic fans? Welcome back to another Minute-ish Review on Cafeteria Drops. Today, we're diving to the action-packed pages of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded number 2. Bloodshot is continuing to hunt down the spent shells in this issue. So, is this more of the same mediocre mess we got last month? Or does the new talent reinvigorate this title? Stay tuned to find out. So let's start with the story. The creative reins have been passed from Dennis Camp to Mauro Mantegna, And let me tell you, it's a change for the better. Mantea's got some serious creativity flowing, and it shines throughout the entirety of this issue. We kick things off with a rundown of the Spent Shell's Bloodshot face since the last issue. And let me tell you, they're a motley crew, including an uber soldier with severe claustrophobia from the experimentation that was done on him, a divine superhero named Elon with split personalities, one a violent sociopath and the other a caring, gentle being, essentially a hero and a villain in the same body. The next was an alien mutant who was created by splicing human and plant-based alien DNA, a villain who can pass through walls, another that can manipulate time backwards within a certain radius of his body, and an AI merged with a demon where Bloodshot had to perform the first digital exorcism. I mean, I would have liked to have seen each one of these battles for sure. Oh, and let's not forget that Bloodshot's girlfriend Magic and their daughter show up in this issue in a secret government hideout. Plus we've got Bloodhound, the nanite-infused dog from Bloodshot Salvation, and Bloodshot's daughter's imaginary cat friend. And this is the real name, I'm not kidding. Bloodpuss. Wow, Mantea. Just wow. And if you thought things were crazy already, it gets crazier. The Spent Shell in this issue can turn fears into reality. And trust me, it gets really bizarre for the people in this town. A man grows so big his bones break from his own weight. A woman stabs her eyes out. There's a giant bear. There's a Klansman infused with necroplasmic energy. There's a walking abortion monster, a town-sized terminal illness tentacle alien, and Bloodsquirt himself manifests in reality. And there's a good bit of dark humor here too. For example, Bloodshot chasing his own head after it's been punched almost all the way off, Bloodsquirt learning what pain actually is, and who knew Harada bought Twitter and changed his name. And we got some juicy reveals later on in the book, like the release of the Spent Shells being planned from the beginning, them being manipulated psychologically to seek out Bloodshot, and then someone from a previous Bloodshot series shows up and knows more than she lets on. But I will say it's not all sunshine and roses. The story has its flaws. There's some pacing issues and logical leaps in there. But hey, suspend your disbelief and enjoy the ride, because this is the single most improved comic, issue over issue, that I've read in a very long time. If anyone at Valiant is watching this, please keep Mauro Mantea around. I'm really interested to see more of his creativity on display in the Valiant universe in the future. Now let's take a look at the visuals for Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded number 2, with art by Al Baranuevo and colors by Ezequiel Fernandez-Roel. The same issues that I had with the first issue are here again, but they are not as glaring because of the step up in the quality of the storytelling. Baranuevo still struggles to frame the action appropriately, and the pencils seem to be a bit rushed, having a low quality sketch pad look to them. Now, it's not the dumpster fire that Livewire and the Secret Weapons was, but they're just okay. Nothing really stands out about the art here. It's serviceable to the story, and really nothing more. There are also a few times within the issue that faces and hands just aren't rendered well, and look pretty awful. The same issues also persist for Ezequiel Fernandez-Roel's colors. They are washed out and yet again really don't capture the look and feel of the character from previous Bloodshot series. Now, I don't know if Roel watched my last video, but this issue of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded doesn't overuse those custom Photoshop blood splatter brushes, so that's surely an improvement. Lastly, the trade dress is excellent again from Alien Books and Valiant, with awesome cover art by Augusta and Alessio, a quality cardstock cover for the book, and thick, glossy interior pages. Overall, the physical qualities of the book are excellent, with the art and colors just being alright. So, what's the verdict? Well, Mantea's storytelling elevates this issue, and there is definitely a place for him in the future of the Valiant universe. The villains are interesting, the humor didn't fall flat, and the trade dress is yet again excellent. However, the visuals leave something to be desired, and the pacing of the narrative is not consistent at all. It's certainly worth a read, but don't expect perfection. Alright, comic fans, that about wraps up my review of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded number 2. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know what you think about the resurgence of the Valiant universe. See you guys next time. How's it going, comic book fans? Welcome back to another episode of Minute-ish Reviews on Comic Drops, where we review the latest and greatest comic book releases and discuss whether they're worth your time. I just have to say, holy crap. Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 3 is most definitely worth your time, and it's filled with absolute chaos and action that is putting all other Valiant books to shame. In this issue, Bloodshot takes on another spent shell from the dump, but this villain is on a whole nother level. Has Bloodshot met his match? Stay tuned to find out. Alright, let's take a look at the narrative of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 3. First and foremost, just like last issue, writing duties are in the hands of Mauro Mantea, and it couldn't be for the better. Just like last issue, Mantea's absolute nutso creativity is on full display, and it makes this book a pleasure to read from start to finish. Not only does he top the quality of writing for the last issue, he exceeds it by a wide margin. You don't find creativity like this in the comic book industry very often. So Valiant and Alien Books, if you're watching this video, please give Mauro Mantea more books to write. This man is a godsend. Anyways, let's see what Bloodshot is up to. The book opens up with Bob, the Biosphere Oversight Base for Gate, orbiting the Earth. And to set the tone for the rest of the issue, we get an F-bomb in the first sentence. For some reason, scanners are detecting impossibly large earthquakes happening across the United States. Only, get this, they aren't earthquakes. Something is jumping across the United States, leaping 300 miles at a time. We also find out at this point the force jumping across the United States is a very similar energy signal to that of Bloodshot. Intrigued yet? And then we jump to the super secret, safe and secure location where Magic, Jesse, Bloodhound, and yes, he's back, Bloodpuss, are living at the moment. Only, Jessie has run away to find her father. We then jump to the location where we ended issue number 2 with Bloodshot, Bloodsquirt, and Deep Tank recovering from their recent battle. Just to remind you, Deep Tank has made Bloodsquirt materialize in reality because of his psyop power to bring a person's thoughts and fears into existence. Deep Tank then warns Bloodshot they need to leave this location immediately, maybe even leave the planet, because of a villain named New Blood. New Blood turns out to be what the book terms an anti-Bloodshot. He goes on to explain that New Blood was created in case of a gray goo event, and at this point I'm smiling ear to ear. All you Valiant fans know exactly what they're referring to here. If Bloodshot's nanites replicate uncontrollably, it creates a giant gray goo that engulfs anything it comes in contact with. We got to see this happen in the excellent Analog Man story arc in Bloodshot Reborn by Jeff Lemire and Louis LaRosa. It was just awesome stuff. We then learn that New Blood can counteract the gray goo with his red goo. And I just want to express thanks to Mantea for making connections to past Bloodshot runs and building upon the mythos associated with them. It just makes sense. It shows me that he understands these characters and has read past runs of the series. And again, this makes me proud to be a Valiant Comics fan. After Jesse and Bloodpuss learn the hard way not to hitchhike with strange truckers, Jesse ends up stealing an 18-wheeler and drives off to find Bloodshot. On the next page, we also get a bit of humor, which I always appreciate, as Bloodshot and Deep Tank are trash-talking Bloodsquirt, only to look up and get completely wrecked by New Blood jumping right on top of them. The setup for this scene is great, and is almost reminiscent of something you would see on Looney Tunes, and it works in this context. Then, we finally get to see this new foe. And let me just say, his design is equal parts familiar, absurd, and horrific. He literally has 5 faces split apart and fused together geometrically with a tesseract and 5 brains so Deep Tank can't read his thoughts and manifest them. In fact, Deep Tank states they're already dead, and New Blood's brainwaves are beyond gamma. Whatever that means scientifically, I don't think it matters much, because on the next page, the dude's head explodes into bits in gory fashion. Just wow, this whole issue has been great. Then, to keep the action going, New Blood sends Bloodshot through 4 buildings with a single punch, only for him to land beside a gas pump with large explosions following. Essentially, Bloodshot can't hurt New Blood, and you would probably think that this issue would end on that cliffhanger. But wait, there's more. In one of the single most awesome scenes I've seen in a Valiant comic in years, Bloodshot's team discovers how to hack the pocket dimension Chambers was using in the previous run of Bloodshot to spawn weapons wherever he needed them. Bloodshot then proceeds to spawn a minigun, a rocket launcher, and ends up dual-wielding freaking chainsaws to fight this monstrosity. It's completely nuts and all great comic book fun. When all of that doesn't seem to work, we then get the surprise of Jessie crashing an 18-wheeler she stole into New Blood out of nowhere. The action just keeps coming in this issue. Then, the issue concludes with Magic, Jessie, Bloodshot, Bloodhound, and of course Blood Puss ready to take on this villain in the concluding issue of this run. Whew! This was a whirlwind issue, and yet again showcases the amazing creativity and action-packed ideas running through the mind of Mauro Mantegna. Again, Valiant, if you're watching this, keep this guy around. I want to see how his creativity and eye for action can improve each of your future series. I mean, alright, I'm going to go ahead and say it. This guy is the best writer you have in your arsenal of talent right now. He has proven himself to be a force to be reckoned with, and I'm certainly excited to see him write more Valiant books. Kudos to him on his excellent work for this title. Alright, next, let's take a look at the visuals of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 3. Okay, let's get something out of the way up front. We have another change in the creative team for this title. So we started out with Dennis Camp on writing duties, and then it was handed over to Mauro Mantegna. We have now switched artists also on this title from Al Barrenuevo to Rodrigo Rocha. Now honestly, I'll have to say that Barrenuevo's art has been serviceable in previous issues, but I'm not a fan. Usually with constant shakeups like this on this title, it spells disaster. However, I'm certainly glad to say that the change in artist is for the better here. Now, just like Exo Manowar and Victus, this new art style is heavily influenced by manga. Of course, I know some of you are saying, now wait a minute, you said you're not a fan of manga style art in American comics in your last video, what gives? Well, I guess I'm coming around to the idea because Rocha's art is definitely better than what Barrenuevo did before him. Rodrigo Rocha does an excellent job framing the action, making each panel feel kinetic and lively. He renders emotions and the reactions of the characters in exaggerated detail that somehow complements the story in a very satisfying way. The way he draws each of the characters is consistent throughout the entirety of the comic, and it's nice to see panels that are drawn interestingly from a visual perspective. I just have to say that I'm pleasantly surprised yet again that I like the manga-inspired visuals in this comic. The powers that be made the right choice swapping in Rocha for this title. Another awesome aspect of this issue is the types of shots used in each panel and how the action is framed. We have everything from close-ups to master shots and even some point-of-view shots thrown in for good measure. Using a multitude of shots like this throughout the comic makes it a much more cinematic experience than previous issues. And of course, I can't discuss art without referencing Bloodshot dual-wielding chainsaws. How awesome is that? I mean, this is the type of Bloodshot that I didn't know I needed. Explosion after explosion, punch after punch, shot after shot is rendered in a satisfying way that enthralled me and kept me turning the pages from start to finish. Also, you can't talk about visuals without mentioning my favorite colorist at Valiant right now, Ezekiel Fernandez-Roel. Roel's colors are excellent in this issue and complement the line art perfectly. Roel swaps between cool and warm colors multiple times throughout this issue to emphasize the mood and atmosphere of each scene with great skill. Within Bob, the glow of numerous computers fills the panels with cool light. While Bloodshot fights New Blood, more warm colors are used to heighten the excitement depicted in each panel. Overall, as a Valiant fan, I couldn't ask for a better pairing of artist and colorist. Awesome stuff. Lastly, the trade dress for this issue is yet again excellent with a cardstock cover and thick, glossy pages. Alright, let's summarize my thoughts on Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 3. I can't praise this book enough. It is setting the standard for the Valiant universe and Action Comics as a whole. The story is completely nuts, the new villain is awesome, it's action-packed, the new artist is top-notch, the colors are great, and Bloodshot dual-wields chainsaws. I can't emphasize this enough. The cons are, well, it ends, and I have to wait a month to find out how this series concludes. Overall, a thank you goes out to Mauro Mantegna, Rodrigo Rocha, and Ezekiel Fernandez-Roel for their awesome work on this title. So that wraps up my review of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 3, and man, I am so thankful for this new creative team. Mauro Mantegna and Rodrigo Rocha are second to none when compared to the other creative teams at Valiant right now. I can't wait to read the next issue after the chaos of this one. Of course, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below what you think of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 3 and this new creative team. Check your pull lists, and I'll see you next week with the release of Rye, the Book of the Dark number 1. How's it going, comic book fans? Welcome back to another episode of Comic Drops, where we take a look at the new comics dropping this week and discuss whether they are worth your time. On today's episode, we're diving into the concluding issue of my favorite Valiant Comics and Alien Books series right now, Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 4. This week we also have the drops of Rye, the Book of the Dark number 2, and Ninjak vs. Roku number 1. This is awesome. I can't remember the last time Valiant fans had 3 comics to choose from in 1 week. So, does Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 4 conclude with an explosive barrage of action, satisfying fans? Or is it a dud before delivery? Stay tuned to find out. All right, let's take a look at the story of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 4. So finally, we have 2 consecutive issues where we have the same creative team. I can't believe it. Every other series right now seems to be swapping out members of the creative teams, but Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 4 has made it to 2 consecutive issues. Anyways, the amazingly creative Mauro Mantegna is still on writing duties on this title, and his off-the-wall way of tackling a narrative is on full display in this issue again. Issue number 3 concluded with Bloodshot spawning a rocket launcher from the pocket dimension used by the spent shell chambers. And issue number 4 picks up right where we left off with the rocket being fired at New Blood. And I'll give you one guess if it damages him or not. Hint, it doesn't. In fact, New Blood catches it and throws it back at Bloodshot. I mean, that's awesome. Unfortunately, Bloodshot dodges the rocket and hits the truck that Jesse, Magic, and Bloodhound are in as they're trying to escape this battle. Okay, let's keep count. Here is kind of comical action occurrence number 1. Then, in a rage, in an epic fashion, Bloodshot jumps up into the air with bravado, winds up his strongest punch, and decks New Blood right in the face, with the only result being a thunk sound effect. And then he immediately gets backhanded by New Blood to the ground. And here we have kind of comical action occurrence number 2. Now, a law enforcement helicopter has been circling the battle since the beginning of this issue. And with this next kind of comical action sequence, we learn why it's there. It's there because New Blood is going to use it against Bloodshot. As Bloodshot gets up, New Blood grabs the helicopter out of the air, hurls it at Bloodshot, and cuts him in half vertically. Yeah, from top to bottom, carved up like deli meat. So we have 2 finely carved pieces of Bloodshot lying on the ground, now with the Goldies trying their best to pull him back together. It's just awesome. Just another classic Bloodshot scene, courtesy of Mauro Mantea. All of a sudden, Jesse gets mad and tries to take a shot at New Blood also, only for Bloodhound to interfere. Now, Bloodhound is able to damage New Blood with a bite, but unfortunately, just as Bloodshot is literally pulling himself together, New Blood rips Bloodhound in half. This comic is all about dismemberment for some reason. And to continue that trend, Bloodshot spawns in a Gauss rifle that shoots tungsten projectiles at 4,000 miles per hour that heat up into plasma because they travel so fast out of the rifle. No matter the science behind this weapon, it's able to damage New Blood. Finally, we can gain the upper hand. This guy is going down. We then cut to Jesse and Magic trying to save Bloodhound, and then the only way to save him is to get him more protein, which Jesse takes as a cue to cut her hand off and feed it to Bloodhound. And of course it works. Then we cut back to the action and New Blood has found another way to thwart Bloodshot's efforts by hardening his skin so the Gauss rifle shots don't affect him. New Blood then forms his hands into giant claws, uppercuts Bloodshot and impales him, and then throws him through a house for kind of comical action occurrence number 4. Then, as Bloodshot is lying in the rubble with Bloodsquirt giving him a pep talk, he has an epiphany. Normally, Bloodshot needs protein to regenerate his wounds, but in some circumstances, according to this comic, he can absorb inorganic matter. However, this can affect Bloodshot's nervous system and brain functions. And to tally up kind of comical action occurrence number 5, after absorbing his surroundings, which I would assume would be the house he was thrown into, we get a hulked out rage monster Bloodshot with glass shards sticking out of his body. And then Bloodshot uppercuts New Blood, sending him flying off the panel, and proceeds to jump on top of him and Bloodshot smash. Until New Blood sends out an EMP pulse and wrecks Bloodshot's plans. As the shriveled up Bloodshot lays on the ground defeated, he says he's out of protein and out of ideas. Until he gets the idea that I am dubbing kind of comical action occurrence number 6. You remember that pocket dimension that Bloodshot has been using to pull weapons to reality, right? And Bloodshot decides instead of pulling weapons out of that dimension, he's just going to send a weapon in, specifically New Blood. And now we have New Blood floating around an alternate dimension, confused with an unlimited supply of weapons. Now, I don't know how effective this solution will be, but for now, New Blood is gone. I find the solution to dealing with New Blood interesting because it subverted my expectations for how I thought Bloodshot was going to deal with the threat, i.e. shoot it until it dies. I think this plants a seed for future events with New Blood technically not being defeated yet. And the issue concludes with the gang getting back together and ends on somewhat of a cliffhanger. New Blood's blood has gotten into Bloodshot's blood, So I don't know what that means specifically, but I'm definitely intrigued. Overall, this issue hits all the narrative beats that I wanted it to and concludes the Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded story arc in a satisfying way. New Blood was presented as the anti-Bloodshot, and this series stayed true to that sentiment. Bloodshot could not best New Blood on strength and weaponry alone. He had to get creative with how he dealt with them, which in turn exemplifies Mantea's creativity as a writer. Considering Valiant's current slate of books and the quality of the storytelling in each, Mantea has done the impossible here. Create a cohesive and engaging story that has connections to the past, present, and future of the character, and simultaneously satisfy and subvert my expectations for this series. I want to take a moment to say thank you to Mauro Mantea for his hard work wrapping up this series in an awesome way. Awesome job, and again, Valiant, if you're watching this video, get him on another series soon. Now, let's take a look at the visuals of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 4. Thankfully, just like I stated previously, we have the same creative team for 2 consecutive issues. And that means Rodrigo Rocha is back handling pencils for this issue, and the amazing Ezequiel Fernandez-Roel is on colors. This team has done excellent work in the past and continues to do excellent work here. Like I've said before, I'm not a huge fan of manga-inspired visuals for American comics, but I guess I'm learning to adjust because Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded is a visually striking comic that I just can't help but like immensely. The characters and locations within this issue are drawn consistently and with an energetic flair. When the more crazier things happen, like Bloodshot being cut in half or Bloodhound being ripped in half, again with the dismemberment, the visuals maintain their quality throughout. Additionally, the locations our characters visit are essentially cannon fodder, so they're not as important to the overall feel and narrative of this series. But what is here, though, is adequate enough to give readers a backdrop for the action. Also, Rocha is not afraid to draw hands and feet, which is again refreshing after reading some of those other books recently released by Valiant. Faith Returns. And seeing the action framed in interesting ways is a nice touch as well. Rocha incorporates a wide variety of shots to make this concluding issue compelling, like close-ups to show emotion or reactions, and wide establishing shots to show scale and size. There are even times when characters break the boundaries of their panels to further make this a more cinematic experience for readers. On the color side of things, we get a lot of complementary combinations from Ezequiel Fernandez-Roel. What I mean by this is a lot of the hues in this issue lean towards either green or red. Of course, this is a thematic choice on the side of colors, and I appreciate the way green and red are used to emphasize what is happening in each panel. When Bloodshot is on the offensive, we are presented with different shades and tints of green. When something abhorrent happens, like Jessie cutting her own hand off and feeding it to Bloodhound, the panels are awash in reds. In that scene specifically, Magic looks on in horror as she is bathed in red, and once Bloodhound heals himself, the scene transitions back to green. It is certainly a nice way to give a visual cue to the audience on how they should be feeling during each scene or panel. The greens used throughout the issue are also a callback to the gamma radiation produced by New Blood, and maybe even the Hulk, as we get to see Bloodshot Hulk out during this battle. Overall, the quality of the colors when paired with the pencils makes for one visually interesting and entertaining comic book to read. And lastly, the trade dress is great, featuring awesome cover art from Brian Level on a cardstock cover and thick, glossy interior pages. From a visual standpoint, this book is setting the standard. Okay, let's sum up my thoughts on Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 4. The pros for this book are numerous. It has an excellent narrative, wraps up this story arc in a satisfying way, sets the standard for action comics, is visually striking, and sets up plot lines for future Bloodshot books and subverts the reader's expectations. The cons of this issue are, well, it ends, and I hate to see this creative team go. Again, Valiant, if you're watching this video, get this team on another book ASAP. I'm thinking Quantum and Woody. Overall, this series went from boring and basic to my favorite series Valiant is publishing right now, all in a 4-issue run. That's pretty incredible. It's been a roller coaster ride for sure, but Mauro Mantea, Rodrigo Rocha, and Ezequiel Fernandez-Roel are the dream team at Valiant in my opinion. I really can't thank them enough for their hard work on this title, and I can't wait to see what they're up to next. Well, that wraps up my review of Bloodshot Unleashed Reloaded issue number 4. Of course, let me know in the comments below what you think about the conclusion to this awesome series. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe for more comic book goodness. Check your pull lists, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll discuss the surprising Rye Book of the Dark issue number 2.